What are the 7 frequencies? Let's just lay the foundation.
There's the motivator, the challenger, the commander, the healer, the professor, the seer, and the maven. Steve Jobs gave you a vision of a future that could be created, but he was also a maven because he saw the impossible as possible. It really comes down to what voices you allowed to determine your identity. And you have to decide at some point, I will not live my life based on the voices that are speaking at me, that I will listen to a deeper inner voice that calls me to the greatest purpose that I have. You have to fill your soul with hope, love, compassion, joy, and faith. And when you're fully alive, your frequency naturally becomes an authentic frequency of light.
Come on, you guys. Have you heard a podcast like this ever in your life? This is just incredible. So, hey guys, listen, we're all trying to get more productive. And the question is, how do you find a way to get an edge? I'm a big believer that if you're getting mentoring or you're in an environment that causes growth, a growth-based environment, that you're much more likely to grow and you're going to grow faster. And that's why I love Growth Day. Growth Day is an app that my friend Brendan Burchard has created that I'm a big fan of. Write this down, growthday.com/ed. So if you want to be more productive, by the way, he's asked me, I post videos in there every single Monday that get your day off to the right start. He's got about $5,000, $10,000 worth of courses that are in there that come with the app. Also, some of the top influencers in the world are all posting content in there on a regular basis, like having the Avengers of personal development and business in one app. And I'm honored that he asked me to be a part of it as well and contribute on a weekly basis, and I do. So go over there and get signed up. You're going to get a free, tuition-free voucher to go to an event with Brendan and myself and a bunch of other influencers as well. So you get a free event out of it also. So go to growthday.com/ed. That's growthday.com/ed. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. So today I get to share one of my favorite men I've ever known in my life with you. Truly love him. I miss him very much too. I don't see him nearly as much as I would like to. He's a life architect, he's an artist, he's an entrepreneur, he's the founder of Mosaic, which is one of the most beautiful churches in the world. He's a contrarian thinker. He's a lovely man, a kind, gentle, brilliant man. He's the type of dude that after you've spent some time with him, you can't help but reflect on the time you had with him when he leaves. Every time I'm with him, I find myself thinking about the conversations we had, days and weeks even afterwards, and I have a feeling that's going to happen for all of you today as well. And man, is this going to be awesome. He's got a new book out called The 7 Frequencies of Communication, which is incredible because he's incredible. Erwin McManus, welcome back to the show, my brother.
It is so good to be with you. It's just good to see your face and to hear your voice and to get to have this time with you.
Me too, brother. I wish it was in person. We both were saying that earlier, but we're going to make this magic as we always do. I have to tell you, everybody, there's all these strengths that Erwin has. I will just say this first of all. I know no better communicator in my life than this man. And there are other things I think he's even more extraordinary at that are probably even more important in some ways, type of man he is. But when it comes to communication, you are talking about a master communicator here. So I'm so grateful you wrote the book. I'm going to show it to the YouTube here. And it's, by the way, a quick read. He sent it to me a while ago and I had skimmed it, but I read all of it last night and cover to cover. And it's one of these books you won't put down. First off, why'd you write about this of all the things? Because you sold millions of books already. And then what are the 7 frequencies? Let's just lay the foundation.
Sure. I mean, I think a huge reason I wrote this book is to see all the disconnection in culture, seeing all the conflict, all the vitriol, all the negative frequencies that are out there, and realizing that so much of our conflict, so much of our disagreement, so much of our distrust is based on our inability to communicate with each other and to hear each other. And so even though the book's about communication, it's really about human connection, because we cannot make deep connections if we do not have healthy communication. And when you do have healthy communication, you naturally make deep human connections. So if I have a deep motivation, Ed, it's to help us connect to each other again. And I know communication is the vehicle through which that happens.
Yes.
And when I began laying out the book, I didn't want it to be a how-to on communication, because I'd seen even some of my friends that I respect tremendously talk about communication, and they focus on like techniques or tricks or methods or skills, and all those are really important. Sure. But they're not what creates the essence of the communicator, because communication isn't something we do. Communication is an extension of our essence. It's a human experience. And so I wanted to go down to the level of our deepest intrinsic selves. And if you could look at human beings as particles and waves, and when I was growing up, I thought of us as flesh and blood, and then later on in my life, I started, looking at the physiological dynamic of human beings are strangely like dust. We're dirt. We're wind, we breathe, we're fire because we have an energetic heart that actually erupts energy, and we're also water because human beings are 80% water, and so we're literally the human elements. But at this stage in my life, I started evolving through going, I think at the core we're waves and particles. And what's interesting about particles is when particles actually meet each other, even when they're separated, they're forever connected together. It's this whole dynamic of quantum entanglement, but it's also that we're waves. And if we think of ourselves as going beyond our skin, when you speak, who you are infiltrates my inner world. It shapes me, it changes me, it affects me. And when you hear someone speak and you sense something's happening inside of you, you may be inspired, but you may also be transformed. And what I began realizing is that humans are more than flesh and blood in that sense. We're waves, and when we speak, we're emitting a powerful force that brings dynamic change in the world. And when people talk about things like manifesting, I always look at things and go, every idea, even though it may not be fully accurate, has a seminal aspect of truth. And I started looking at how our words not only shape who we are, but they shape who others are. And a lot of times we want to, quote, manifest things and say things that are outside of our control. I can say, the sun's going to stand still, but it's probably not because it's outside of my control. But when I look at my 10-year-old child, now they're fully grown, but when my son was 10 or my daughter was 7, if I looked at them and told them they had value, I was affecting the world inside of them, the universe inside of them. If a father who looks at his son and says, you're a disappointment to me, you'll never meet up to my standards, or you'll never earn my love. Those words have the power to create universes inside of us. Wow. So I wanted us to understand the creative energy and power of our words. And so then as I began putting together this universe, I saw 7 frequencies, and it took me 40 years of listening and speaking, but over 3 days, I began putting together this frequency system. And the frequencies that were more obvious to me were the ones that were furthest from me. I could identify the frequencies that were not emitting out of me on a daily basis. But as the frequencies got closer to who I was, they were more difficult to see. The last 2 frequencies I identified are my number 1 and 2 frequencies. And I began even processing this, thinking, I wonder if this is the way most of us are. Because I can hear other people's frequencies, but my frequency isn't a frequency. It's just me.
Right.
It's just who I am. Yeah. And so I began having fun and looking at people like you that I love and admire. And you are so unique in your communication style. And I began noticing that the best communicators in the world speak from multiple frequencies, not in sequence, but in synergy at the same time. So let me, before we go into that, because that's more complex.
Can I say one thing to the audience? I want you to keep going. I want everyone to understand something about Erwin. What you're going to get out of today's show is so much detail and depth that I want to make a value proposition and a commitment with my audience before I let this man share with you. And that is that he's going to give you a lot today, and more than normally an author would probably give out of their own book. And so the value proposition, everybody, is this: you go buy the book, because I can promise you there's value in the book you won't get out of today's show. So if Erwin's going to be willing to go this deep of what came out of him in this book, and by the way, when he was writing, I'm getting emotional for some reason. When he was writing it in the beginning, he had talked to me about it. And I remember thinking, this work really matters to him. And I can tell he thinks I'll say it was Holy Spirit delivered. I mean, he really believes the value. And then when I read it, I went, oh my gosh. So the value prop, everybody, is this: he's going to share a lot with you today. Go get the book. Okay, everybody agree to that with me, and then we'll let Erwin rip through here. So keep going, brother. I just wanted to interject that.
Yeah. Sometimes I get nervous telling people how some of these ideas come to me.
Yeah.
And because they sound very eccentric or esoteric. But what happened really was on a Friday morning, my son Aaron came to me and said, we need a 15-minute gift you can give on video that helps us promote the art of communication, which was a master class that we had out there in the world. And that in many ways you were a part of inspiring me to create. And so I thought, okay, what 15-minute gift can I give people? So I wasn't thinking about creating the 7 frequencies. I was just trying to put together this 15-minute communication insight.
Wow.
And I didn't sleep for 3 days. My wife thought I'd lost my mind. You know, she saw me like at 4 o'clock in the morning, drenched in sweat, having slept for 3 nights in a row. Wow. And I just I'm very visual. And so I start seeing the frequencies, and I see them in colors, and I see them in waves. And so I begin to almost like step into this world. And best way I can describe this is I was downloading this. And I think what I was experiencing was, 66 years of living, of listening and interacting and connecting on a human level, and then begin to see these natural frequencies. And so what I would not say is that these are all the frequencies in the world.
Okay.
What I would say is that these are the 7 most significant frequencies for human communication.
Okay.
And so the way that the 7 breakdown, I'll just give them real quickly, is that there's the motivator, the challenger, the commander, the healer, the professor, the seer, and the maven.
Okay.
And the first one I saw most easily was the motivator. And I think part of the reason I saw it most clearly is because I think it's one of the ones that we need the most. That we're drawn to communicators, to speakers. If you look at social media, if you look at some of the greatest communicators on platforms, they have a natural ability to bring energy to the room, to inspire us, to elevate us, and to increase our own self-belief. And so what's happening is that the speaker isn't making us believe in them. The speaker at their most powerful force is making us believe in ourselves. And we believe in them because of what's happening inside of us.
Wow.
And one of the powerful things about a motivator is that motivator brings all this kinetic energy of their enthusiasm and excitement and belief in the goodness of people. And what is also wonderful about a motivator is that they don't usually see the downside of who you are. Or if they see it, it just doesn't matter enough for them to pause there and talk to you about it. They just see the best in you. And I don't have any motivators in my inner circle, but I have motivators like you and John Gordon that are part of my friendship circle. And my inner circle I'm talking about is my family,
Right,
my wife, my kids.
Right.
And that isn't a family frequency. But
do you stay there for a second? I have to ask you this. You said the ones that are the furthest from you, you don't think you have a motivator quality to you?
I do think I do have a motivator quality to me.
I'm like, my gosh, of course you do.
We'll talk about this too, but you have what I had to create a phrase for you.
Right.
You have what I would call a power cluster. Because you have 5 frequencies that are all basically so strong that you can access any one of them whenever you want to. Okay. You only have 2 frequencies that are really far away from your natural communication experience.
Okay.
And because you and I have spent our lives learning the art of communication, and we look at communication both as a science and an art. It's
right.
It's both for utility and for poetry.
Yes.
And so when you're looking at communication and you're diving into it, you're understanding how humans connect, you're going to access more frequencies than the average human being.
Okay.
So when you speak, you're not even thinking about it. You're evoking multiple frequencies at the same time. Okay. And that's why an audience can experience you differently at the exact same moment. Because some of them are receiving your motivator, some are experiencing your healer, some are experiencing your challenger, some of them are experiencing your seer, and you have this incredible, it's multifaceted communication approach that connects deeply to people.
That's how I see you, Erwin. I'm not, and by the way, we're not complimenting one another. Like that's exactly, I saw all 7. I'm like, Erwin has all 7 actually, but I know which ones you're stronger in, I think, but I see that in you as well. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm thinking to myself, I'm one of the most motivational people I've ever met is you, but I also know you're definitely a healer. There's the professor side because you're so brilliant. I mean, it's just very hard for me to imagine which ones you lack, but I'll let you keep rolling. I don't want to interrupt you because this is the show for you today. I don't need to have a lot to say.
But I just encourage people, you need to have motivators in your life. And if they're not in your inner circle, you need to get them into your broader circle. And one of the great gifts we have in the world right now is we have access to the greatest communicators on the planet. And someone can access you. They don't have to know you personally, but they can grow from your influence in their life by just clicking a button. And I in fact, I was so surprised. I think it was Brendan Burchard just a couple of weeks ago. He was speaking and he got up and said, I listen to Erwin when I'm on my elliptical every day or on my Peloton every day.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't think that someone like a motivator like Brendan Burchard needs to listen to other people. But we all need these voices in our life.
Amen.
And I can tell you there are times in my life I don't really believe in myself. There are days I don't know if I have what it takes. There are days where I wonder if I'm ever going to make the impact that I sense deeply in my soul that I've created to make. And then when that person just shows up in that moment, gives you a call, sends you a text, and that motivator frequency explodes into your soul, and I'm like, okay, I can do this.
So, hey guys, I want to jump in here for a second and talk about change and growth. And by the way, it's no secret how people get ahead in life or how they grow. And also taking a look at the future. If you want to change your future, you got to change the things you're doing. If you continue to do the same things, you're probably going to produce the same results. But if you get into a new environment where you're learning new things and you're around other people that are growth oriented, you're much more likely to do that yourself. And that's why I love Growth Day. Write this down for a second. growthday.com/ed. My friend Brendan Burchard has created the most incredible personal development and business app that I've ever seen in my life. Everything from goal setting software to personal accountability, journaling, courses, thousands of dollars worth of courses in there as well. I create content in there on Mondays where I contribute, as do a whole bunch of other influencers, like the Avengers of influencers and business minds in there. It's the Netflix for high achievers or people that want to be high achievers. So go check it out. My friend Brennan's made it very affordable, very easy to get involved. Go to growthday.com/ed. That's growthday.com/ed.
But there's also another frequency that seems similar to motivator, but it's very different. It's challenger. And the challenger frequency is a little more intense. If the motivator is like a fresh glass of water, the challenger is a fire. They're burning coals. And challengers call you out and they call you up. And the powerful thing about being around a challenger is that they really believe there's greatness inside of you. And they think one of life's greatest tragedies is for you to live beneath your potential.
Yes.
It's almost too painful for them to see mediocrity, to see people accept the status quo. And that's, if I can say this, that's your number one dominant frequency. You're a challenger and you get up on stage and you look at people and there's probably two voices in your head one saying, look at all this untapped potential.
Yes.
And then this other voice saying, and you're going to untap it. And in the next 45 minutes, you're going to break the lid off of this and people are going to step up and become more than they've ever imagined.
Yes.
And that's the challenger frequency. And it's a really, really powerful frequency. And my daughter, Mariah, has a challenger frequency. And when she sends me texts, most of the time she's correcting something in my life, challenging me to do something a little better. And frankly, it's interesting. She'll challenge me by saying, Dad, remember, you're only supposed to do what you love doing. And she tries to remind me that, I've lived a life of obligation too often. And she goes, Dad, you have permission to just live the life you want to live. Yeah. So she's always challenging me back to my core intention, which is a really beautiful thing.
That's beautiful. By the way, you want to hear a beautiful voice, you should hear her sing, everybody. I mean, like, you will have never heard anything like her before. Keep going. She's
really special. And
she's very special. Yes.
She's up in Wyoming right now writing another album, which is so exciting. and so there's that challenger. And when I think of our friends like Ben Newman, he's a natural challenger, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Every time Ben speaks, David Goggins, people like that would be, the challengers who are. You never think you've met their expectations, though. Sometimes you take a deep breath and go, have I done enough today? Am I?
Do you think
good enough today?
I'm skipping ahead, but I want to ask you. I also think that's why, if a challenger can also have a healer frequency, they can sort of fix the wounds they inflict on you when they're frustrated with you. I mean, obviously Jesus had all 7 of these, but I think about he rebuked the apostles, yet he would wash their feet.
Yes.
So there's the healer frequency, but he was also a challenger as well, right? I mean, I think I'm right about that.
Absolutely. In fact, I just did a talk on the 7 frequencies and Jesus, and showing how all these 7 frequencies are powerfully self-evident in the life of Jesus. And for those who are really interested in the influence of Jesus in the world, or who actually are followers of Jesus, I think it's a really significant, study on human communication, because you cannot argue that Jesus was one of the greatest communicators who ever lived.
Of course, absolutely. So, okay, so far, if you're listening to this, everybody, maybe we haven't hit a frequency that you tap into yet, that's yours. But so far, are you a challenger? Are you a motivator? And by the way, when he's describing these frequencies, you're thinking of somebody that you know, if it's not you, as he describes them. Obviously, I relate with those first 2 very deeply. But what are some of the, let's go through the other ones, Erwin, because everyone's obviously wondering when you're going to hit their frequency if they haven't heard it yet.
Well, I'm going to predict that a great number of your audience or your listeners love motivators and challengers, because challengers your highest frequency, motivators your second highest frequency. So you're going to draw people who have already set in their mind, the challenger in my life is Ed Mylett's voice. The motivator in my life is Ed Mylett. And so they turn you on a daily basis because they want to be both motivated and challenged in their life. Yeah. The next frequency is the commander. And the commander is an interesting frequency because it can be very utilitarian. It is a approach toward communication that's trying to move you toward your best position and your best direction. And so when a commander is incredibly healthy, they're not trying to tell you what to do because they need to tell you what to do. They're telling you what to do because they're trying to help you succeed and achieve what you need. And they have the information, the authority to actually know the direction you need to move in. And so commanders emit incredible authority. They don't have to say, I'm in charge. If you have to say you're in charge, you do not have a commander frequency. And a person with a commander frequency, they're just in charge. They're in charge in the restaurant. They're in charge at the at the gym. They're in charge on the padel court. They're in charge in their house and their home. Well, maybe, and unless they're married to another commander, and they just, and people trust them. You know a commander when they say just the smallest thing, like, do you guys want to get pizza? And it doesn't come across like a command, it's a question. Would you guys want to get pizza? But everyone hears it as a command. Everyone goes, yeah, let's go get pizza. Because this commander frequency, even the questions come across like statements or commands. Now, for whatever reason, I'm a person who believes deeply in God, so I look at this as not just incidental, but my wife, Kim, her number 1 frequency is commander.
Yep.
And then my son, Aaron, who's 36, his number 1 frequency is commander. So God decided I needed 2 commanders in my life so I could have clarity and direction. And
you know what? I've been around Kim a little bit too. I would think everybody should know this. A commander doesn't have to be loud either. It's a frequency, correct? I mean, I think that's important why you probably called it a frequency. It's an energy. Because I've met Kim, and I don't consider Kim to be like this dominant person over and thinking that way, but yet you're saying her frequency is a commander frequency. There's a distinction there, everybody. That's important for you to know. Because a lot of you're picturing Trump or some general somewhere, and that's not necessarily always what a commander appears to be.
No, in fact, many commanders are very introverted, and they're incredibly concise because words are utilitarian. I'm just going to say what I need to say to get everyone to move where they need to move.
Gotcha.
And if you're in a fire, you want a commander. If you're in the ocean and a storm comes, you need a commander.
Got it.
And all of us at some point in our life need to exercise this commander frequency. And if I can give you just a kind of a bizarre story in that, because I don't really use a commander frequency very much. Most people don't experience me using it. But the other day, we're sitting in our living room. It was like 9 o'clock at night. And my wife's on this Nextdoor app, and she said, "Wait a minute! All of our neighbors said someone's trying to break into the house, into their houses, and they said they're coming toward our house." And Kim can get a little, paranoid, and so she goes, "Is the front door locked?" And I'm like, "Honey, it's okay. I don't want to get up, But this time, I just responded to her need very quickly, and I said, "I think it's locked, but I'll check it anyway." I jumped up. I go to the front door, and to add to this, last month I was playing a sport called padel. It's that racket sport with glass all the way around.
Yes.
I was playing with John Gordon and my son Aaron and others, and I went for a ball really fast, tore my hamstring. It threw me forward. I tried to stop myself from hitting the net, and when I looked at my arm was going in two directions at the same time. I completely separated my elbow, and it was protruding, trying to break out through the skin. They had to rush me to the hospital and reset my arm. So this is 2 weeks after. So I'm actually really crippled. Mm-hmm. I can't even move or use my arm. Mm-hmm. And I open the door because our door is broken. So I have to open it to see if it's locked.
Okay.
I open the door, and this guy is walking up to our house to break into our house, and he's probably 5 feet away from me.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
And here I am, and I know that I don't have the physical capacity to probably win a battle, a fight with this guy. And he's walking up, and I looked at him, and I said, "Stop." And this guy stopped. And then he said something to me, and I said, "No, turn around, go." And he turned around, and he went.
Wow. So you access your commander frequency in that moment.
It is, and And my team has actually seen me in some very, very dangerous, and a lot of people don't know this about me. I used to work with drug cartels and in the world of drugs, prostitution, street gangs, assassins, and I'm a very quiet person, actually, very introverted person, and pretty much soft-spoken. In 40 years of marriage, I don't think my wife's ever heard me raise my voice. But it's a different frequency. I didn't yell. It was a frequency of authority. And because he wasn't used to a person that's supposed to be a victim interacting with him that way, he simply obeyed what I told him to do. And he left our house and he went to another house.
That's an incredible story, brother. Sorry about your injury. I actually just heard about that yesterday. And everyone, just so you know, it was a bad injury.
Yeah, it was
really bad injury. Yeah. Okay, so that's the commander. Oh my gosh, what a great story. And interesting that Kim is a commander. Okay. Keep rolling. You don't need me today.
Yeah. So we have a healer, and I'll try to maybe make them more concise, but
it's fine.
The healer frequency is the next frequency I'd love to talk about. Individuals who emit a healer frequency create a safe space for people. They don't have to say, "You're safe with me." You just know you are. When a person has a healer frequency, they see you for who you are. You feel seen. You feel the vulnerability is not a danger. And it's almost as if your wounds find a place to find healing and restoration. And one of the most powerful things when you hear a communicator, and someone like yourself, when you're using a challenger frequency and you're calling people to extraordinary expectations, and you're motivating them to an ambition that maybe they would not pursue without the level of faith you're infusing into them. But there's also brokenness. There's childhood trauma. There's an endless history of failure. There's a deep sense of insignificance and a question of whether they have the talent or intelligence or ability. And all of a sudden that healer frequency is emitted at the same time. And that person finds this unexpected experience where they not only find the courage to act, but they find a source of healing that deals with the brokenness and the wounds that are holding them back from becoming the person they long to become. And I think some of the best communicators in the world, in fact, I'm certain of this, have a healer frequency that emits with another frequency. And many times when you go to a therapist, you'll only have a healer frequency. And so they're willing to process with you forever, but there's no progress.
Gosh, that's true, Erwin. Whoa.
So you need to have a combination frequency to really help a person achieve their highest level of healing and health. But I love this healer frequency. It's the person, you know how your friends will come up to you and go, you know, how you doing? Or just a stranger, how you doing? Or, you know, somebody at work, and they don't really want to know.
Yeah.
It's just a hello.
Yeah.
And you go, I'm doing fine, even though your world's falling apart. You know, yeah, I'm doing great, even though you're just absolutely in their pain.
Yes.
The healer's a person when they say, how are you doing? And you go, great. They look at you and go, nah, I don't think you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they see right through you, and they can be terrifying because many times healers do not want to stay at the surface. Right. They want to go deep. They want to deal with honest conversations, and they may make you terribly uncomfortable.
What makes a leader? It's a tough question, but one thing's for sure. A true leader leads by example, and a true leader takes risks too. They plunge into life with determination. For those who lead by example and who approach life with a palpable passion, there's the Range Rover Sport. Each Range Rover Sport model offers a dynamic, sophisticated take on sporting luxury. The Range Rover Sport offers focused on-road performance and world-renowned off-road capability with industry-leading features like adaptive off-road cruise control that monitors ground conditions and acclimates to the present terrain. Agility, control, and composure are achieved with dynamic air suspension, and adaptive dynamics reduces unwanted body movements to deliver smooth and composed handling. True sophistication and excellent maneuverability, all in a seriously stylish package. Sophisticated refinement meets visceral power in the Range Rover Sport, a new dimension of sporting luxury. Build your Range Rover Sport at LandRoverUSA.com. I didn't have this question reading the book, but now that I'm listening to you, can your frequency change as you age? The reason I say that is just in my own case, I think certainly I'm a challenger, but I am. But in my own case, I'm thinking, no question at 30, was I a challenger of people? But I got to tell you, like at 53, the way I view me, which may be incorrect, is more like the healer frequency as I've gotten older. So I'm wondering, can one step forward based on a change in life experience, or are you sort of the frequency you're born with?
No, that's a great question. And the reason most people ask this question is most assessments are static.
Okay.
What you are is what you are. But the 7 frequencies are dynamic. The basic assumption is that all 7 frequencies are inside of every person. But some of them will remain dormant all your life.
Gotcha.
And some of them will be more dynamic. And as you grow, the intention of this is twofold, that your frequency would elevate and that your frequencies would expand.
Gotcha.
So you might have another person who's a healer, but their healing frequency isn't as developed as let's say yours. And ironically, it may be their primary frequency. It might be your tertiary frequency, but your healer frequency is still more developed because of your maturity.
Gotcha.
And each frequency grows through the combination of empathy and authenticity. So as you grow in empathy and as you grow in authenticity, every frequency elevates and becomes more powerful.
Gotcha.
But yes, as you grow and as you live your life and as you go through experiences, a different frequency can rise to the top. In fact, I think that one of the signs of underdevelopment is that you only have one frequency all of your life.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I think of you, maybe more than anyone I've ever met, very high on all frequency levels. I would agree that Commander is not your biggest one. No question about it. I would agree with that. But well, he's a healer. He's a motivator. Well, he can challenge too. I'm just thinking through friends of mine too, as I'm sure everybody is as they're listening to this today and themselves. And by the way, the reason this matters, everybody, is, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but one of the reasons it really matters is self-aware people are just happier and more influential. Just awareness of this changes you. And most of my friends, I think one of the things most of them, if you're going to kind of be around me, I just like self-aware people. Because I think self-aware people are funnier. They can poke fun at themselves. They make a bigger impact. And so that's why today's podcast is so critical, everybody, amongst many other reasons, because communication is everything. But it's also just an awareness of self, and maybe also an understanding of your partner or the people that work with you. Or if you're building a company, are you lacking somebody with the healer frequency in your entire company? And that's the missing link. Are you lacking a commander? Are you lacking a motivator? So there's all kinds of applications of this So I just want to interject that as to why the work matters so much. Okay, so we've gone to commander, we've gone to healer. What's next?
Next, I would focus on the professor. The professor frequency is an interesting frequency in that it's very data driven. It's about the attainment of knowledge, information, history, data, and then transferring that to the people. It's this belief that it's the knowledge that will change a person's life. And what's really fascinating to me, Ed, is that I've done this done this conversation about the professor frequency in two interesting places. One with, I think it's Arthur Brooks from Harvard University.
Yeah, I know Arthur.
And
yeah,
I was doing a Q&A with him, and then I opened it up to the audience, and someone asked him, how do you deal with negative emotions? And he literally said, remember, emotions are nothing but data. And that this is a perfect professor frequency, which is almost like stereotypical because he's a professor at Harvard.
Correct, right, exactly.
Right? Studying happiness and struggles with happiness, right? So it's, and my other friend is also a person with an extraordinarily high IQ who claims to have the highest IQ in the world. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but he also has been studying happiness, which is very interesting, and has a system for how to be happy. And he gave me a call at home after I talked about the 7 frequencies, really upset, and challenged me, saying, you said that only the professor frequency is focused on data, that data is truth. And I thought he was offended that it was too limiting. And he said, what else is there? And he goes, aren't all the frequencies driven by data? And I said, no. You know, and he goes, give me an example of anything else besides data. I said, how about like love?
Right.
Which I'm sure for him is data. And so the professor frequency is that person who downloads massive amount of information, and then the transmitting of that information is the key to your happiness, key to your freedom, the key to your future, the key to your better self.
So good.
And so what you go through oftentimes in school is you have people with professor frequencies who may not actually have any experience in that subject, but they know that subject better than everyone else.
Yep.
I mean, there are people at Harvard who know business better than you and have never made any money.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And what I mean by knowing business better, I mean they know the academic.
Absolutely. They can read a balance sheet
business
quicker than I can. They understand macroeconomics and microeconomics, and I don't. You're 100% right. Totally true.
And so this frequency is a very, very powerful frequency, and it works better when it's combined with another frequency. When a person only has a professor frequency, they see every solution as just a shift in information, which, by the way, is a part of the huge problem in the political system, is that both sides think they have the right information. And you don't change anyone's political view by adding more information. It's because we have a self-validating internal mechanism where we only see the information that validates our already pre-held assumptions and positions.
100%. That's right. I'm just curious, before we get to the other couple, do you have a theory about what makes like a great president, for example, like a leader? Do you think they should emanate a particular combination of frequencies, or can any frequency make a great leader of a company or a country?
Yeah. What's interesting, Ed, is that the question is what makes a great president is different than what makes a great candidate. And we usually combine those two.
What do you mean?
Well, for instance, without taking a political position on it, all right, whether you liked Barack Obama or not, he stepped into a moment where there was a lack of vision in our culture. And his dominant theme was hope. Hope becomes, now we're in the seer frequency, okay? And because the next frequency after the professor is a seer. And I do think that the best leaders have a strong seer frequency.
Okay.
They have an ability to imagine a different future, a better life, a better self, and to create a compelling, magnetic environment where other people believe that vision is possible and pull people into that. And so what Barack Obama did in his first campaign was built it around vision. And so the vision America needed was overriding what policies we might agree on. And so when people go, why would people vote for him when they don't agree with his policies? It's because the seer frequency is so powerful that people will vote for a seer even if they disagree with the policies.
Interesting.
And you might not vote for someone whose policies you agree with if they don't seem to have a vision of the future. So the seer frequency is very, very important. But sometimes, let's say if you have economic collapse, when you have economic collapse and everything's in disarray and everyone's in chaos, you might want someone who has more of a professor frequency because they seem to have a handle on all the chaos and information and all the data and all the stuff that's confusing everyone. And they go, no, I understand all this.
Yes.
And so it's really what frequency is the complementary frequency that the culture and the environment, the circumstance needs most.
It's really interesting because if I thought about, and I'm, you and I are very, I don't know what you call us both politically. We're similar in the sense that we're not really leaning one way or the other very dramatically. But if I were like to think in basically my lifetime, even though I wasn't quite born yet, you said, who were the great politicians, if you want to call it that? I'd tell you like Kennedy, Reagan, Obama, the great communicators that have been president, maybe Clinton. And by the way, that's not necessarily who I voted for one way or the other. I'm just about communication. And all of them have that ask not what your country can do for you. They have that seer element to them. No question about it. That's interesting.
That is one of the dynamic differences. Those individuals actually created a sense of a future that they would create if we entrusted leadership to them.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And so it doesn't matter in terms of political position. And frankly, one of the interesting dynamics that we've had for the last dozen years is that we don't have candidates who actually paint a compelling picture of the future.
I was just thinking about that. It's all how bad it's going to be if you pick the other person.
Yeah.
I was thinking that
I don't want to over-interject politically, but I can tell you that if Donald Trump could stop attacking the left and simply in the last 5 days cast a vision for the future, he would win the election in a landslide. Because the question people ask is, we know what you're against, but we want to know what you're for.
Yeah.
We want to know that and it's not even, and see, policy doesn't answer that question. And the issue with Kamala is that no one senses that she has a vision for the future. And so even people who agree with her politically are incredibly apprehensive because it feels as if she walks in a fog and doesn't see a clear future. Being a seer adds an immense amount of clarity and confidence in people in their political and choices. Yeah. And so when I look at things, I don't just look at them politically. I go, what is this person bring to the moment that the environment so desperately needs?
I got to tell you a quick interjection on that, and then we'll talk about Maven, which is the last one. I got to know Wozniak pretty well from Apple, one of the two founders. And I've just become, especially the last 3 or 4 years, I've just become really interested in Steve Jobs. Like, what made this guy built, I think, the most influential company of our time. You could argue one way or the other, but in Apple. And I asked Woz one time, I said, what would you say? And it's amazing that you called it a seer. Because you know what he said to me, Erwin? I remember where I was sitting when he said it. He said, Ed, he could see things and get you to see things that you would never otherwise have seen without him. And he said, and then he told me, he says, Steve believed that you had to sell, I've talked about this many times. He said, sell a big enough dream that the dreams of everybody within your stewardship could fit inside the one you're selling.
That's right.
And that made him a seer, dominant frequency as a leader. And so the terminology even of this download you got is so spot. He used the word see twice in the same sentence with me about Jobs, who's clearly one of the great visionary CEOs, whether you agreed with when they let him go the first time or whatever, of all time. And so Erwin is so right on with this. What's a Maven? Because I think you believe you have a lot of Maven. Am I right about that?
I do. And it's the last frequency identified, and it was the most difficult frequency for me to identify. And a huge part of the challenge for me was I could see aspects of myself in the first 5, and seer was the 6th one identified. And that's my second highest frequency. And it's right next to my first. It's like your challenger and motivator are actually right next to each other.
Okay.
And my number 1 frequency is a Maven. And one of the most difficult things to explain to people about the frequencies is this one, because it's not very common. And sometimes I joke about it going, it's not very helpful. And because Steve Jobs gave you a vision of a future that could be created, but he was also a maven because he saw the impossible as possible.
Okay. Yep.
And a maven is a person who naturally lives outside of the box. It's not a person who thinks outside of the box. You can think out of the box with discipline, from any frequency. Mavens don't naturally think inside the box. And one of the things that really struck me with mavens is that they violate our view of what is normal, of what is right, of what is acceptable. And so I've spent my life being called a heretic. And I've spent my life living outside of orthodoxy, even when I thought I was trying to cooperate. And I remember 30 years ago, someone asked me in an interview, what exercises do you use to think out of the box so much? And I said, you don't understand. I spend all my energy trying to think inside of the box because I want to be loved and accepted. And there are some people who are just wired, the wires are not wired the same way.
Yep.
They just don't see reality the same way. They don't see the world the same way. And so they're always questioning reality.
Would you think someone like Musk, what you do know about him, he'd be a maven?
Yeah, Elon Musk is clearly a maven.
You know, I got to go back to Jobs and just to meet you in the middle on that. There's this great clip I'm actually using right now when I teach on social. Maybe we'll weave it in right now.
Apple's strategy is really simple. What we want to do is we want to put an incredibly great computer in a book that you can carry around with you that you can learn how to use in 20 minutes. We don't know how to do that now. It's impossible technically. So we had three options. One was to do nothing. The second one was to put a piece of garbage computer in a book. And we can do that, but our competitors are doing that, and so we don't need to do that. The third option was to design the computer that we want to put into the book eventually, even though we can't put it into the book now. And right now, it fits in a bread box, and it's $10,000, and it's called Lisa. The next thing we will do is we will find a way to put it in a shoebox and sell it for like $2,500. And that'll be the next step. And finally, we'll find a way to get it in a book and sell it for under $1,000.
But there's a clip, and basically I'll mess it up, but he basically says, hey, listen, someday we're going to put this computer in a book. He says in a book. And he goes, and we don't know how to do it yet, basically. And he goes, we could do it right now like our competition does, and it'll be crap, and we won't do that. But first it's going to cost X amount of money, then it's going to cost Y, and eventually we're going to get this computer, we're going to put it in a book, and it'll be less than $1,000. He basically described the iPad 15 years before it happened. And so he was seeing things. So seer and maven are interesting, huh? Help me with the distinction there between the two.
Seers help you see a more beautiful, powerful view of the future. Mavens attack what you believe is real. And they change your view of reality.
You just literally described you. Yeah, that you just described you. Yeah. I called you a contrarian thinker when I introduced you. I called it a contrarian thinker. I usually describe you that way. But that's exactly, you're a maven.
Yeah, and one of the things I had to really struggle with, and the reason it was so hard to see this, is that I just always saw it as a liability.
Really?
Because all my life, I couldn't figure out how to see the world the way other people saw the world. And then I became a person of faith. And so I thought, oh, I'm just going to naturally be like a Christian, like everyone's a Christian. And nothing looked the same to me. And even when I read the Bible, I see and hear something completely different than what other people see and hear. And I've just had to accept the fact that I just don't see the world from the same paradigm, the same filter, the same perspective. And Ed, it's one of the reasons why by the time I was 10 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair in and out of a hospital. Because, you know, at 10 years old, I'm trying to figure out whether there's any meaning to my existence and whether human existence is arbitrary or intentional. And I created a scenario in my own mind that, you know, I was from another planet, that they had dropped me here as an experiment to see if our species could merge with humans. And I would run away from home and go out to fields and scream to the stars when I'm 9, 10, 11 years old going, it doesn't work. We don't fit here. Please take me back. And I felt this incredible sense of loneliness.
I was just thinking about children like you which is rare. But so if you're thinking about finding a unique gift this holiday, let me tell you something that could really help the people that you love grow and get better. You can't do any better than Masterclass. Masterclass allows you and your loved ones to learn from the best to become their best. Take an expert in an industry, and they're on Masterclass. It's the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best at what they do. Learn from any Masterclass instructor anywhere on a smartphone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I have to tell you, I'm doing a cooking thing on there right now because I really want to make better food for the fam. And so I'm on there right now doing through a cooking thing. And the classes make a difference. 80% of the members feel Masterclass made a positive impact in their life, and there's no risk. Every new membership, 30-day money-back guarantee. Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/Mylett for the current offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/Mylett. Masterclass.com/Mylett. Hey guys, I've been learning Spanish now for 3 years. I would tell you that I've gotten pretty darn good at it, and I can tell you the only reason, because I got a D in Spanish in high school and a C in college, is Babbel. Spelled B-A-B-B-E-L. I love Babbel. They're the best learning environment in the world to learn a second language, and you should do it, right? You know, challenge yourself to learn that language. And by the way, it's done easily. They have all these language experts that build these 10-minute lessons. So you're done really quickly, but you're growing, and it's role play in the sense that you're learning how to really pronounce the words. And in my case, it's like using it grammatically correctly as well. And I could not speak a word of Spanish before I started. It's the best place easily I've ever seen in my life. Here's a special holiday deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/Mylett. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/Mylett. That's spelled BABBEL.com/Mylett. Rules and restrictions may apply. Visit babbel.com for terms and details. If you're raising a Maven, how many of those Mavens, when they were being raised by a non-Maven who couldn't get it, were constantly told to get back in this other box, get back in this other box, be like everybody else? I think our education system probably helps eliminate most of those people from thinking they're smart because they don't fit into just transferring information. And I've always wondered about you, Erwin, and this is a personal thing, and I hope it doesn't violate any trust. And if it does, we won't even put it in the show. But when I met you, I immediately thought this is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And I'm going to compliment him, and then I'm going to ask him a hard question. And everything I'm about to tell you is true, and it's going to be personal for you. I'm asking you this. I wanted to ask you this privately, but we'll record it, and if you don't want to put it out, we won't. But I meet this man, and the first thing when Erwin walks in a room, and I mean this, he's very handsome. First thing is he's a very handsome man. And then when you begin to listen to him, he has as high an IQ and as big of an imagination as anybody I've ever known. And then he's got this amazing heart. He's kind and generous, and he's definitely got a lot of healer in him. He really does. His vocabulary, when he speaks, it's like poetry. And when he says things, it moves people like me. And I know a lot. I know everybody. And I just thought, what a remarkable man. And then when you're in a room, he's one of these guys, when he walks in, he's not a here I am. He's a there you are guy. Always makes other people feel special. However, I was struck when I met him that I don't think he knew that about himself. I was struck at, if I'm being candid, because I love him, and I'm going to ask you this, because I want everyone raising a child with whatever their frequency is that could just be different than them. I don't know if I would call it a lack of confidence based on capacity, but I think that's what I would say. Someone who has this massive capacity and has changed millions of people's lives, yet seem to not have the confidence equivalent to his abilities and nowhere even remotely close to it. And I remember thinking, if I could wish for this man, it would be that he knows how incredible he is, because I think his impact would even be bigger than it has been. Yet it's been so big. A, am I right about that? B, why? C, what would you say to somebody who may be taking that confidence from their child just because they're different than them?
Well, this is a awkward moment. And thank you, Ed, for everything you've expressed. But yeah, absolutely. I am a person that has struggled with confidence all of my life. And I've always felt that I just, I didn't have what other people had, or didn't have the ability other people had, or the talent, or, and, some of it goes back to some, maybe childhood experiences and stuff like that. And I was a straight D student, first through 12th grade. And I just couldn't focus and sit in the class. It was so boring. And I remember even when I took geometry, it's stupid, but I missed class all the time. I showed up, took a test. I got all the answers right. They brought me in front of the class, accused me of cheating, and moved me into a portable by myself to take the next test to prove that I wasn't stealing the test. And because when they asked me, how could you solve all these problems? I said, well, you organize the questions based in different sections. I just looked at, the similarity between all the different problems and figured out what the formula would be. And the answers just seemed self-evident. And so instead of somebody coming and going, hey, you might have like a peculiar ability, I was told I'm a cheater and that I need to be put in a portable by myself to take the tests. And I thought I failed the test. So I said, why do I need to cheat to fail? And those kind of experiences just kept happening to me throughout my life. And so I just thought, wow, I whatever it is that makes a person great, I don't have that. So yeah, I'm really aware that I have limited my impact in the world because of my lack of self-belief. And it's something I really do live with. And by the way, and I'm just going to say this, one of the reasons I felt that you were a gift from God to my life is that one thing I'm a voracious learner. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of issues, but like arrogance isn't really one of them. I'm incredibly teachable. Mm-hmm. And so I would watch you and learn from you. Mm-hmm. And I would find attributes in you that were incredibly admirable that I lacked. Mm. And so I just began absorbing things that you had, and because of your, frankly, your invitation to be on your podcast opened up a different world for me as well. Mm. And when I would be in those worlds, I would realize, oh, this is a really easy world.
Yes.
In terms of like, I can swim here. I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. And I remember when someone came to me and, introduced me to this person that was supposed to be like, the most brilliant person in the world. And he came and, sat next to me, goes, I was told a conversation between us was inevitable, so let's go. And I'm like so nervous. And then an hour later, I'm leaving going, oh, he's just regular.
Yes.
It's just normal. Like, and
Yes.
I don't know what a genius IQ looks like, but it's feels very natural to have these conversations and be able to actually win the argument.
Well, I knew that when you would get in those rooms, I knew what would happen. And I also knew the more successful, I'd call it maybe the person's vibrational frequency, the higher they were, the more they would notice this in you. I knew this about you. Sometimes in life, it's just important to have someone maybe that you might admire say, you have the goodies. And I want to ask you, by the way, I just want to say this to everybody, the way I phrase the question too. Erwin's made a massive impact in the world. Very rarely will a month go by, maybe a month, where I meet somebody who says, hey, you changed my life, or hey, just so you know, Erwin McManus made this impact on me as well. So it's like, let's be very clear. I just don't know that I've ever met somebody with a capacity greater than Erwin's. That's what I'm telling you. And I mean that. And I'm wondering if you were to give someone advice, is your frequency to some extent your communication genius in every person? And do you feel like it's really dangerous if let's just say I'm a professor type frequency and my wife and I give birth to a challenger or a commander, that you almost try to get your children to conform to your frequency and that you suppress that in them to some extent?
Yes, we don't mean to do it. We crush our children out of love, and because we think if they become a version of us, they become the best version of themselves. Hmm. And one of the things that's really helpful is to help your children understand what environments they thrive in. Because if my primary frequency, let's say, was motivator, I would thrive in the audience, of people who simply need to be motivated. But I realized that I work best with people who are top tier thinkers, leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs. I help people become great. I'm not as great as helping people become average. Those aren't the problems that I'm good at solving. And so some of it is I had to realize, oh, there are other people who can solve those problems better than me.
Yes.
And I shouldn't be using my energy to do that. I can do those, but I just become average there. It's almost as if as the pressure cooker gets more intense and more intense, and as there is a reduced space for failure.
Yes.
Because you naturally move toward a space that minimizes your room for average. A lot of people have a lot of room for success because they're choosing average.
Yeah, right.
So you can hit average.
Yeah.
But every time you push yourself a little bit further up, the gap closes of making wrong choices or being the wrong person.
So good, Erwin. By the way, everyone, we're going to get to some life stuff in a minute. I always go a little long with Erwin because it's too good. My producer's already looking at me, but we're going longer because it's too good. But I want to say one thing to everybody. We're going to talk about how you can find your frequency in a minute. So Erwin wrote about me in the book and described what my frequency was. And then I took the test. What you call it a test? What do you call it?
I call it an assessment.
An assessment, and it ended up being 100% spot on, like 99% spot on. So you can describe that if you want really quickly, but then also everybody can go get their assessment to figure out what the assessment tells them their frequency is. You can tell them how.
Yeah, actually, because I knew the data, I was 100% right about you.
Okay.
And what people won't be able to see, because you see your top three, challenger, motivator, healer. But your seer and commander are just as equally strong as your healer, motivator, and challenger.
Interesting.
So basically you have this communication frequency cluster. And what I wanted to really highlight was the fact that you have an unusual ability to use commander and healer and challenger at the exact same time. Other people may be able to use them one after another. But I've listened to you. When you're in an optimal space, I've listened to multiple frequencies coming out of your soul. And I think it's pretty extraordinary.
Thank you.
And so I describe you in the book as having that unique ability to use a triad.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you use the triad of challenger, motivator, healer. But I also know that there are times you use the triad of challenger, commander, healer.
Interesting.
And you just basically get up there and you have earned authority. And I think you're self-aware enough to know I have intrinsic authority in this room. I can tell this room what to do because they're ready to listen. There are other rooms you go, I don't have the same level of intrinsic authority, so I'm going to have to challenge this room. And then other rooms you go, I don't have any intrinsic authority here. And I'm Ed Mylett, and I'm more of a celebrity to them than I am an authority to them. And you use that motivator frequency as a dominant frequency. I actually think it's the tip of your spear that changes as you communicate. So that's the way I would read you. And that's how
awesome.
I describe
Thank
you in the book.
I will accept that very much so. Thank you, by the way. What is fascinating is to take this assessment, you guys. And it's not hard to do, and it'll be very revealing to you. And it's a gift. Erwin's basically, it's not a gift. I mean, it's a nominal charge for it, right, Erwin?
Well, actually, what I wanted to do is it's normally $20, which is pretty cheap.
Yep.
But we created a code that says Mylett 7.
Okay.
And anyone who goes will get it for $7.
Oh, cool. Okay, awesome.
And the reason we're going to do 7 is I'm trying to help them remember to pick up the book, The 7 Frequencies of Communication. So I want that number 7 blazed into our souls.
Where do they go to put in Mylett 7? Where do they go?
Go to the7frequencies.com.
Okay.
The7frequencies.com. Spell it out. And then just go there, and the code is Mylett 7 at checkout.
Okay, everybody, please do that. I want to ask Erwin a couple life questions really quick because we're over, and it's just I never want to let Erwin go when he's on. You talked about this recently, and it just struck me. This isn't a frequency thing necessarily, but why are so many people, and you said you had a little of this too, or maybe a lot of it, they're in their own way. They're their own biggest enemy in life.
Yeah.
Why? How?
I think there can be multiple reasons, but self-doubt is a really fascinating thing. It really comes down to what voices you allowed to determine your identity. All of us have a series of voices that speak to us from childhood all the way through life. But those voices do not matter until you accept them as your voice. So if someone says to you, you don't matter, but your voice tells you you do matter, that voice doesn't have power over you. Yeah. But when you let that voice shape who you are, and I think for me, Ed, I had voices inside of me saying, don't be too successful. I literally was always my greatest enemy. This voice, because I'm a deeply spiritual person.
Yes.
And I have this, I mean, my life is centered around the person of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And I've never wanted to do anything to invalidate my relationship with him or to cause anyone to ever question my sincerity. So what that did for me is it actually created some self-limiting mindsets, because I didn't know how to become the full version of myself and not have people question my faith. And when I had to realize eventually, and I think this is one of the things I learned from you and so many others, is the better you're at something, the more people are going to hate you. There is no way to escape opposition or hate or whatever you want to describe it. And once I could accept that, going, even if I'm completely sincere, there's always going to be people who question your sincerity.
So true.
And so then I went, well, if I'm going to have people who hate me anyway, I might as well be the best version of myself. I might as well move toward optimal performance. And at this point in my life, Ed, I'm at the point where I'm going, I want to have the greatest impact on the world that I can while I'm still on this earth. Mm-hmm. And writing the 7 frequencies was a huge part of that journey for me. Writing Mind Shift was a huge part of that. And what I'm going to do from this point forward in my life is I'm going to give to the world what I feel will create the greatest contribution on this planet.
I love it.
And you have to decide at some point, I will not live my life based on the voices that are speaking at me. That I will listen to a deeper inner voice that calls me to the greatest purpose that I have.
Oh, it's so good. Erwin, he's had so much to give you guys. And I remember, you probably don't remember this, but there's even shame in some people's lives about making a little bit of money.
Oh, I've had so much shame for that in my own life, Ed. I mean, my wife and I had a salary of less than $12,000 for 10 years. Gosh. Because I thought it was ethically wrong for me to make money. We slept on the floor. I wouldn't buy a bed because I told her that was a luxury, not a necessity. I don't know what got into my head. And I remember one day we were married, we had kids, and I said, I think that it's okay. I think God told me it's okay for me to make some money. Mm-hmm. And she goes, you can make money? I said, oh, I've always known how. I just would have to stop myself. Mm-hmm. And she goes, well, could you, start like now? but I always put a cap on myself.
Yeah, that's right. You did, Erwin. You did.
And I've always known I could make billions of dollars. I've never had that confusion in my head. And the confusion in my head was, do I give myself permission?
Do you know what you said to me about why is this so huge? Why I asked you. I was wondering if you were going to say this. You guys, you won't remember this, Erwin. We were at a friend's house. You know whose house it was that lives on the ocean. And you and I walked into the kitchen and I kept telling you, you're in this room and you're like, I've met these guys now. And it's not that big of a deal. And I said, Erwin, you could impact millions of people. And you said, Ed, and you kind of had this cringe when you said it to me. You go, I think I'm going to allow myself to make some real money now. And even when you said it, there was this discomfort in you. I said, Erwin, you have permission to do that. You just got to give it to yourself. Now, I don't know that you remember that moment, but I know where I was standing in the kitchen when you said it. And I just want everybody to hear this. This is a man who's coached some of the most influential people in the world. Top people in industries come to him. And even in his case, he had to give himself permission to allow some form of abundance to flow into his life because of some sort of a limiting belief around it. Now, if that's true of someone with his eloquence and brilliance, are any of you suffering with something that you're not giving yourself permission to feel, whether that be joy or love or the love of God, your faith, to know you can be somewhere in eternity? Maybe it's wealth, maybe it's physical health, but there's probably something today that you're not allowing yourself or giving yourself permission to have and feel. And give yourself the gift today like Erwin did. And by the way, once Erwin unlocked that type of permission, he had more financial abundance, but his impact grew with the world changers he now affects, right? Erwin, that opened up other lanes for you.
Absolutely. And one of the things I realized for myself is I'm just not motivated by money. It just is not a good motivator for me. but I am motivated in seeing people's lives changed. And instead of waiting for someone to finance the vision we have to impact the world, we create the wealth, we finance it, we help millions of people. It's just so much more exciting, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
And
You light up when you talk about it. You do.
Yeah.
Can someone, I want to ask you one last question on the frequency thing, because I feel like I want to know this for myself. Can someone shift their frequency intentionally, or do you just like play to your strength and your genius?
well, you can shift, and if it's a high frequency for you.
Okay.
But we didn't even go there, but there are 7 shadows within each one of these frequencies, Ed.
Can you go there for us at the end here? Go there for a minute.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long.
Okay.
And-
Give us a flavor. Give us a flavor.
All right, so I'm going to name the shadows. The shadow of the motivator is the performer. The shadow of the challenger is the manipulator. The shadow of the commander is the dictator. The shadow of the healer is the cipher. The shadow of the seer is the perfectionist. The shadow of the professor is the diminisher. And the shadow of the maven is the nihilist. And this is a spectrum. It's not that you're in one category or the other category. All of us are on a journey toward authenticity and living our life in the light. And even the best of us, we can be motivators and find ourselves insecure in a moment or uncertain in a moment, and we become performers. You know, all of us, let's say if you have a commander frequency, if you're angry, if you've had a fight with your wife, and or if your child has disappointed you, you can shift into the shadow and become a dictator. And if you're a healer and you love helping people find the deep healing of their wounds, but when you're in your own wounds, you become a cipher and you start using people for your own healing rather than giving your life for their healing. Each one of these has a very strong shadow that pulls the person in. The professor who's living in their shadow becomes a diminisher. That person who elevates themselves by speaking badly about other people, making you less rather than making myself more and pulling you up with me. Each one of these has a strong shadow. The challenger, because it's such a powerful frequency, can become a manipulator. And what I would say is the way you can understand the shadow is when your frequency is focused on serving, your frequency naturally moves toward the light. And when your frequency is focused on self, it naturally moves into the shadow. And you can't change your frequency without changing the condition of your soul. And when people go, well, how do I get out of my shadow? Well, you have to get rid of bitterness, anger, jealousy, greed, envy. You got to get rid of the stuff that actually informs that frequency. How do I move to my positive frequency? You have to fill your soul with hope and love and compassion and joy and faith. And when you're fully alive, your frequency naturally becomes an authentic frequency of light.
Gosh. Come on, you guys. Have you heard a podcast like this ever in your life? This is just incredible. I am so grateful for you. And, one other thing, Erwin, by the way, everyone, go get the 7 frequencies of communication. Okay, just go get it. God's so incredible in his wisdom. For years, guys, people were trying to introduce Erwin and I many years ago. It just never happened. And I'm very convinced that for both of us, God introduced us at the exact right time in our lives. And it was many years ago, but it was not when I had hoped to know him, or I think even when my name first came up on his radar, yet the timing was absolutely perfect. And my life is so much better because you're in it. And my only regret is that we sound like we talk more today than we actually do because we both become so busy. But it's that relationship with somebody that you just love and admire and adore so much that you miss when they're not around. And as I promised you in the beginning, everybody, when you're done having a conversation with them, you find yourself reflecting on it hours, days, and weeks, and sometimes months and years later. And I promised you that in the beginning, and I'm almost 100% positive that will be true for many of you tonight, tomorrow, weeks from now, months from now, and years from now. Erwin, thank you. I love you.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, Ed.
Sure has.
Love you, man.
I love you. 7 frequencies of communication, everybody. Share the episode. Get on my email list at edmylett.com if you've not done that, so you're getting updates and early access to the show. God bless you. Max out.